welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be diving into geopolitics and finance.
Ooh, fun.
Specifically, the future of the U.S. dollar.
Okay.
You've sent us a ton of videos and articles.
Right.
And it seems like you're really interested in understanding this whole multipolar world concept.
Yeah, for sure.
And what it means for global trade and power.
It is a hot topic.
So let's unpack all this.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We've got insights from economists, political scientists, and even some bold statements from China and Russia.
Oh.
And even a certain former U.S. president.
Okay, interesting.
Our mission is to sift through all this info and help you understand what's really going on.
I like it.
And why it matters.
Okay.
Whether you're an investor,
Right.
an entrepreneur,
Got it.
or just a citizen of the world trying to make sense of it all.
I think that's most of us.
One of the sources you sent
Okay.
was a video from the Jay Martin Show featuring political scientist Glenn D.
Okay, yeah, I've seen him.
He really digs into this idea of a multipolar world.
Right.
Meaning a move away from a single superpower, so like the U.S.
Okay.
calling all the shots.
Right.
Diaz argues that the U.S. is losing its grip on that top spot.
Interesting.
And not necessarily to China taking over,
Right.
but to a more diversified system.
Okay, so a multipolar world.
Right.
Got it.
Deanna also makes this interesting point about U.S. sanctions,
Okay.
which are basically those economic punishments
Right.
that are used to maintain control.
Yeah.
He argues that they could actually be backfiring
Really?
and even speeding up this multipolarity.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so he essentially says that by isolating countries,
Okay.
the U.S. is actually pushing them to find alternatives
Oh, wow.
to the U.S.-led system,
I see.
almost like forcing them into new alliances.
Interesting.
And a prime example of this
Okay.
is the formation and expansion of BRICS.
BRICS, right?
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yep.
They're basically banding together to create a whole new economic infrastructure outside of U.S. control.
So outside of that U.S.-led system.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's a big deal.
So it's kind of like breaking up with someone and then being surprised when they start dating someone new.
Haha. Oh, I like that analogy.
But why is the U.S. so determined to hold on to this dominant position?
That is the question.
Being the world's reserve currency comes with perks.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The U.S. can basically export its inflation
Uh-huh.
and then tax the rest of the world through a devalued dollar.
Wow, that's a pretty sweet deal.
It is, if you can get it, but D points out that the U.S. might be playing with fire here.
How so?
Well, the country is currently sitting on a mountain of debt,
Okay.
somewhere around $36 trillion.
Oh, wow.
And he argues that years of malinvestment,
Okay.
fueled by low interest rates,
Uh-huh.
could be leading us toward a banking crisis.
That's scary.
It is.
Yeah.
He even uses this analogy of being caught between a rock and a hard place.
Mm.
So raising interest rates to protect the dollar can send the economy into a tailspin.
Right.
But lowering them to save the economy might devalue the dollar even further.
So they're stuck.
Basically,
Wow, that's a tough spot to be in.
talk about a dilemma.
Right.
Some people argue that the U.S. has a history of kicking the can down the road
Okay.
and avoiding disaster.
Right.
But is this time different?
Yeah. Is it?
There's another interesting data point we need to consider.
Okay, what's that?
Central banks around the world,
Uh-huh.
especially in 2022 and 2023,
Right.
went on a gold-buying spree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that wasn't a coincidence.
So what happened?
Remember when the U.S. and the EU froze Russian assets?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
That sent a shockwave through the system.
Right.
And it made a lot of countries realize that they needed to diversify
Okay.
and reduce their reliance on a system that could turn against them at any moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like realizing you need an escape hatch.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Even mainstream voices are sounding the alarm about de-dollarization.
Okay.
You included an article from economist Mohammed Al-Arian.
Oh, yeah, in the Financial Times.
Right. And he's not exactly known for being radical.
Right.
And he points out how central banks, especially in BRICS countries,
Mm-hmm.
have been steadily increasing their gold reserves,
Interesting.
which suggests a deliberate move away from the dollar.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, exactly.
Taught it.
Al-Arian even goes as far as to say that the dollar system is like the least dirty shirt in the hamper.
Oh, wow. I like that. So it's not perfect.
Right.
But it's the best we've got for now.
Exactly. There might not be a perfect alternative yet,
Right.
but the search is definitely on.
Yeah, that's clear.
And it's not just talk either.
Oh.
The report from the 2024 BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia,
Uh-huh.
they laid out some pretty concrete plans.
Okay, like what?
They're talking about setting up multi-currency systems,
Okay.
creating a cross-border payment system,
Wow.
and even using commodities for trade settlements instead of the dollar.
That's a big change.
It is.
Yeah.
They're even discussing de-dollarizing central bank reserves.
No way. So they're really serious about this.
It seems like it.
Wow, this is huge.
Yeah, the dollar might not vanish overnight,
Okay.
but it seems like the tectonic plates of global finance are shifting.
Interesting analogy.
And they call this trend secular,
Right.
meaning it has long-term momentum.
So this is a long game.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's interesting to think about the historical context here.
Okay.
Glenn Day, in that Jay Martin Show video, highlights this concept of imperial overstretch.
Okay.
Basically, when a country's global commitments, both militarily and economically,
Right.
exceed its actual capabilities,
Okay.
it eventually starts to weaken.
So like trying to juggle too many balls at once,
Exactly.
eventually you drop a few.
Right. And the U.S., with its massive $36 trillion debt
Yeah.
and trillion-dollar annual deficit, seems to be reaching its limits.
Those numbers are mind-boggling.
I know, right?
It's hard to even wrap your head around it.
Yeah, and Deuce argues that instead of tightening its belt after the 2008 financial crisis,
Yeah.
the U.S. doubled down on borrowing and spending,
Okay.
which led to what he calls malinvestment
Oh, wow.
and inflated asset bubbles.
So basically kicking that can down the road
Exactly.
and hoping for the best.
And now it seems those chickens are coming home to roost.
Oh, boy.
And we see this reflected in the gold rush,
Yeah.
that surge in central banks buying gold.
It's like they all woke up one day and said, okay, time to diversify and fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The freezing of Russian assets was a major wake-up call
Right, because it showed that the U.S.-led system could be weaponized.
against anyone.
Yeah.
Suddenly, gold being a tangible asset,
Yeah.
outside of that system started looking really attractive.
Like an insurance policy.
Precisely. It's like having that escape hatch.
Exactly.
In his Financial Times article, Al Arenen emphasizes this point, highlighting those consistent gold purchases by central banks
No.
in BRICS and other countries seeking to reduce their dependence on the dollar.
It's interesting because he even calls out the hypocrisy of the U.S.,
Right.
accusing other countries of currency manipulation,
Right.
while simultaneously using those accusations as political tools.
Yeah, it's a bit like the pot calling the kettle black.
Totally.
And he states that the U.S. dollar system is the least dirty shirt in the hamper,
Okay.
implying that while there may not be a perfect alternative,
Right.
other options are emerging and gaining traction as
And-
trust in the U.S. system erodes.
And he specifically mentions a general loss of confidence in America's management of the global order.
Right.
And he points to things like the weaponization of trade tariffs and sanctions,
Okay.
and a decreased interest in multilateral cooperation.
Yeah.
He even mentions the U.S. shielding its allies, specifically Israel, from international condemnation
Oh, wow.
for actions that are widely viewed as violations of international law.
That's a heavy accusation.
It is. It
Yeah.
seems like the U.S.'s unilateral actions
Yeah.
are pushing countries away
Right.
and accelerating the search for alternatives.
And let's be honest, these actions aren't just about economics.
Right.
They're about geopolitics and maintaining control.
Absolutely.
The U.S. has a long history of using its economic and military muscle
Right.
to exert its influence around the world.
Yeah. Anyone who steps out of line gets punished,
Right.
whether it's through sanctions or regime change
Yeah.
or even outright war.
The case of Russia is a prime example.
Okay.
Despite the West's attempts to cripple its economy through sanctions,
Uh-huh.
Russia has managed to adapt
Mhm.
and even thrive,
Okay.
surpassing other European economies in growth.
So it's almost as if trying to isolate and punish Russia backfired,
Yeah.
only strengthening its resolve
Right.
and pushing it to seek closer ties with other countries.
Exactly. Particularly China and Iran.
And these new alliances are further weakening the U.S.'s grip.
From a global system,
Right.
Dare describes this as a horizontal escalation,
Okay.
where conflict in one area, like Ukraine,
Uh-huh.
spills over into others,
Okay.
creating new hotspots and increasing global instability.
So it's not just a shift in economic power.
Right.
We're witnessing a fundamental realignment of global alliances
Exactly.
playing out across multiple fronts,
Hmm.
economic, political, and military.
It's like a tectonic shift, reshaping the entire global landscape.
Wow.
And it's happening in the context of a growing multipolarity,
Right.
with the U.S. facing increasingly powerful challenges to its dominance.
One of the most interesting aspects of this shift is the role of China.
Right.
It's fascinating to see how they've managed to leverage their economic power to expand their global influence.
Dier makes a point of saying that China's approach isn't about replacing the U.S.
Okay.
as the sole superpower.
So they're not trying to become the new hegemon.
Exactly. Their goal seems to be to create a more balanced multipolar system where no single country dictates the rules of the game.
It's more of a cooperative rather than a competitive approach.
Precisely. And this is reflected in China's focus on building infrastructure, strengthening regional partnerships, and promoting its own currency, the yuan, as an alternative to the dollar.
But they're not trying to force the yuan on everyone.
Right. China seems to understand that a multipolar system requires multiple currencies and diverse financial architectures.
So it's not about replacing one dominant currency with another.
Wait, it's about having options.
It's like a garden with a variety of flowers, each contributing to the overall beauty.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And this diversity, in China's view, is essential for global stability and prosperity. It's about creating a more resilient system, less susceptible to the whims of a single power.
And this vision seems to be resonating with many countries in the global south who are tired of being dictated to by the West.
It feels like a rejection of the old colonial order. And an embrace of a more equitable and inclusive system.
And this rejection is manifesting in concrete actions.
Exactly, like de-dollarizing trade. Creating alternative financial institutions. And forming new alliances.
It's a quiet revolution happening beneath the surface of mainstream media narratives.
It really does feel like a whole new world is being born.
It does, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. This shift is happening gradually. It's a long game.
With many challenges ahead.
For one, the U.S. is not going to relinquish its dominant position without a fight.
They've already shown they're willing to use any means necessary to maintain control.
From economic sanctions to military intervention.
Exactly.
The U.S. has a long history of using hard power.
To protect its interests.
And as this multipolar world takes shape. We're likely to see more of that.
The question is, will the U.S. adapt to this new reality or double down on its old ways?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. The answer will have profound consequences for the future of the global order.
This transition to a multipolar world is fascinating.
But it's also incredibly complex.
There are so many moving parts, it's like trying to solve a multidimensional puzzle.
And one of the most intriguing pieces of that puzzle is the issue of currency.
The dollar's dominance is a cornerstone of U.S. power.
Like the foundation of their global empire.
Exactly. And as that foundation is chipped away, the entire structure starts to wobble.
We're seeing this play out in real time.
Yeah.
As countries increasingly seek alternatives to the dollar.
Right.
For trade and investment.
It's not just about finding a different currency.
Yeah.
It's about creating a more diverse and resilient financial system.
Okay.
One that's less susceptible to manipulation and control by a single power.
Exactly. And this trend is only going to accelerate as the multipolar world takes shape.
It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, gathering momentum as it goes.
And as the snowball grows, it's going to have a significant impact on the global balance of power.
The U.S. is going to have to adapt to this new reality, whether they like it or not. The question is, will they adapt gracefully or fight tooth and nail to maintain their grip on the old order?
That's a question that's going to define the coming decades.
And one that we'll be exploring further in our next deep dive.
Sounds good.
It's crazy to think we're watching this financial thriller play out in real time.
I know, and with incredibly high stakes.
And the plot twists just keep coming.
Right, like that whole Trump tariff threat.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost cartoonishly villainous.
It does feel like a desperate attempt to cling to power.
Yeah.
And it highlights this key point. The U.S. dollar system. It's not some benevolent force for good.
Right, it's a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool of power and influence.
Yeah.
And it allows the U.S. to exert control over global trade and finance.
And when countries try to opt out, the U.S. doesn't take it well.
They don't like that.
It all ties back to that idea of imperial overstretch.
Oh, yeah, from Dash.
Yeah, when an empire starts to decline,
okay,
it often lashes out, trying to maintain control through force rather than cooperation.
Makes you wonder if history is repeating itself.
Right.
I mean, we've seen this pattern play out time and time again.
Yeah. Empires rise.
They overextend.
And eventually they fall.
The signs are definitely there.
The U.S. is facing economic stagnation, political polarization,
right,
and an overextension of its military power.
Okay.
These are all classic symptoms of an empire in decline.
And it seems like the more the U.S. tries to cling to its dominant position,
yeah,
the faster it slips away.
It's like trying to hold sand in your hand.
Yeah.
The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers.
Perfect analogy.
Thanks.
And as the U.S.'s grip weakens, other powers are rising to fill the void.
We're seeing this with the BRICS countries.
Yeah, like China and Russia.
Exactly.
But also with regional powers like India and Brazil and Turkey.
It's a genuinely multipolar world emerging.
Yeah.
And the U.S. is going to have to learn to navigate this new landscape.
If it wants to remain relevant.
It's like learning to dance with new partners.
Right. The days of the U.S. leading the waltz are over.
The music is changing.
Yeah.
It's becoming more diverse, more polyrhythmic.
It's like a global symphony.
Yeah.
With each region playing its own tune.
I like that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the future of the dollar,
yeah,
it seems like the main takeaway is that change is inevitable.
Yeah, the old certainties.
They're crumbling.
The U.S. dollar's dominance is waning.
New powers are rising.
And a genuinely multipolar world is taking shape.
It's a time of great uncertainty.
It is, but it's also a time of great opportunity.
Yeah, for those who are willing to adapt.
To embrace change.
And to see the world with fresh eyes.
Absolutely.
This has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I've learned so much, and I hope you have too.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.